At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to end executive session and resume the regular meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. At this time, executive session has ended, and we resume this regular meeting of the Lawrence Alliance for Education. I do want to note that the LAE approved a 2% increase in accordance with Section 6C of the employment agreement between the Lawrence Public Schools and Superintendent Cynthia Paris, and a vote of 6-0 in favor of the motion. So at this time, I would ask that we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, we will have public comment. I have 3 individuals signed up. Tom Barksdale.
I'd like to ask if they could possibly consider changing the white top uniforms to something that either matches or something, because you wash them and it's like they just don't seem to wash out. I iron them for my grandchildren, send them to school, and I don't want them to go to school looking like bums. I'm trying to find something that's going to look nicer. They look nice when they're ironed. Love the idea of the uniform. Uniformity is great. And so that's all I came to make mention of. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Barksdale. Appreciate it. I just want to mention the rules around our public participation. We cannot directly address somebody who asks a question from there, but what we can do is have somebody from LPS be in touch with you relative to your request. We thank you for that. Mr. Mali?
Umayr Mali, 53 Chester Street. Good evening, honorable members. We, the citizens, are proud at the end of this year with the outstanding progress of Lawrence Public School. Our public school moving forward with the best leadership of Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris. Impeccable leadership has been positive changes for our public school. Our public school now has more high school graduate, more level 1 schools. We are the best family resource center, so they bring parent, educator, and children together. We have the most progressive budget. Lawrence Public School, under impeccable leadership of Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris, kept open during the worst Columbia gas crisis, while the pain and suffering of our citizens is ongoing. Maura Haley, as Massachusetts Attorney General, has done nothing to support a victim of Columbia gas fire and destruction. Maura Haley must resign immediately. The citizen of this great city, with the hope of best future for our children in the year 2020, when our teachers and their union going for their contract, they must know we are behind them 100%. With the best hope of holiday wishes for the leadership and our children and our teachers union. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mali. At this time, I'm going to hand it over to the superintendent for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. So first, I want to share some bright spots in our districts that have been happening since we last met. We have great news all over our district. First, I'll start with performances that are happening this week and next week. We have Once Upon a December at the PAC tomorrow night and Friday, and then we have our holiday winter concert on the 18th. I also want to report that our art auction was held last week successfully. Board member Pat Mariano was present, and she always is a big supporter. We raised money for, I'm looking at my notes, but maybe Pat can jump in. Hang on. Here it is. So we raised a total of $8,500, and $4,300 was given to Debbie's Treasure Chest. This is an organization that provides our families with winter clothing, toiletries, toys, sneakers, and house needs. $2,700 of it was given to youth development organizations, specifically after-school art programming, and $1,500 is going to LHS college scholarships. Next, I also want to report that we are recipients of the Bar Foundation grant. We had shared with you earlier this fall that we were very interested in applying for this grant. This is an enormous opportunity for us to think about our students and our high school experience. It is called the Portrait of a Graduate Cohort, and this is a collective vision of what all high school students will know and be able to do by graduation. Assistant Superintendent Maricel Sheets is the lead on this, and we'll look forward to sharing with you the details of how we're going to spend our time and engage stakeholders in this process. The other thing that we're excited to share with you all today is that we're also recipients of the Kaleidoscope Collective for Learning pilot. This is an initiative by DESE. It's called the Kaleidoscope Collective for Learning pilot program, and it's a program aimed at involving more students and teachers in deeper learning. We have 2 of our schools, recipients and finalists that were named today, one Enlace and then Up Oliver. Lastly, I want to remind everyone that we also mentioned to you all that the high school got accreditation, so you're all invited to the January 30th party celebration at 3 p.m. with our staff. And break will begin for students and staff on December the 20th, returning January the 6th. Tonight, I also want to share with you my thinking around goals for the next evaluation cycle. So I'll pass around a draft and welcome your feedback. There you go. These come directly from the feedback that you all shared with me in my last evaluation process, and there are 4 goals that I've drafted. The first one is designed around the turnaround plan and earned autonomy framework. And so I hope that by the end of this cycle, I'll be able to support with the nominations, and you'll hear a little bit later about this tonight, nomination of members of the committees. I also want to make sure that this process is a collaborative one and that stakeholders are able to share their feedback. And it's also my deep desire that the process is an inclusive one and transparent so that we're all on the same page when it comes to the turnaround ideas, district-wide goals, school-wide goals, my own goals, and then the needs of our students, staff, and families. Goal number 2 is around the high school redesign, and as I just mentioned, we are recipients of the BAR grant. That's definitely going to be supporting those efforts. We've been talking extensively about the needs, the growing needs of our high school students, and our desire to redesign the plan, so that's outlined here. Goal number 3 is around student supports and ongoing continuum of services for both social, emotional, mental health, and of course academic for our students at risk. And lastly, I shared with you during my last process that I would maintain the goal of effective district governance to include transparent board superintendent relationships. I feel like last year I had a strong start with you all, but that I can improve those relationships with respect to communication and seeking your input. So I'd like to keep this goal as well.
So just from a process standpoint, I just want to say to board members, I think the next step here is for you to review these goals between this meeting and the January meeting, and to give the superintendent feedback between this meeting and the January meeting so that she can craft a revised version, which would come before us for a vote at the January meeting. And so I am asking board members right now if that is a process that will work for everyone, or if anyone has a different proposal. That works.
Works.
So that is what we will do. Board members will review these goals between now and the January meeting. Board members will give individual feedback to the superintendent that she will incorporate into a revised set of goals that we will discuss and potentially vote on, hopefully vote on in January. I'll turn it back over to the superintendent.
Great, so next, we're going to have a fiscal update. Maciel Jordan, our CFO, will be briefing us on that. In your materials, you will find a memo to include a briefing on the transitional relief aid.
So I'd like to start by bringing your attention to the second quarter financial report memo that you have. Not much has changed since the last time we met, other than salaries being encumbered. So we all know that that's a huge part of the budget. So encumbering the salaries did bring us to having 83.3% of our budget spent, which is in line with how much we have spent at this time of year under the same circumstances in previous years. We continue to process and encumber tuition through the special ed department, and the transportation invoices were all encumbered the last time we met as well. So if you have no questions on this, I can continue to update you on the transitional relief aid funds and also our Title I spending.
I actually have a question. I just want to make sure that I understand. We're less than halfway through the fiscal year, but the reason that we've spent 83% of our budget is because we've encumbered the salaries. is
Correct,
what
and
you're
the
saying.
salaries are
Okay.
encumbered through the end of the school year.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
yep.
Thanks.
So I'll continue on and update you all on what we've spent our transitional relief aid funds. So when I last met with you in September, I let you guys know that DESE did provide additional funding to districts that had been negatively impacted by the change in the low-income enrollment measurement. And they provided us with an additional $1.9 million that was completely unrestricted and would not be counted towards net school spending. Since receipt of the funds, we have spent 73% of the money. The money has gone towards operational expenses, facilities, safety, instructional support, student support, special education, family outreach, and athletics. So just to give you an example of some of the expenses we're covering with this money, we will be updating our IT infrastructure, which will definitely make it a lot easier to be able to use our Chromebooks and our electronics in the schools, and as well as throughout the district as it stands now. And then we will also be upgrading Lawrence High School's intercom system. We also are providing some stipends for professional development, and we are also providing Chromebooks for the high school as well to help them with their early college program and re-engagement of students. Okay, so then the last memo.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I have questions. So the IT infrastructure replacement, is that that's an operational expense or a facilities expense?
So that's an operational expense.
Okay. So I'm curious about the decision-making process. So I'm seeing like 2% allocated for special ed, family outreach, and athletics of the new money that came in. So 2% of roughly $2 million is what, 40 grand?
Correct.
Okay, so that seems like what was the thinking that we went through that, like, given how much those issues have surfaced, I'm surprised that that's not a larger percentage of the allocation of these transitional funds.
Yeah, let me jump in. So in terms of process, Jess, we thought about what can one-time funding support. In the bucket of special education and outreach, the real need is long-term FTEs, and because this is one-time monies, it doesn't allow for that.
Okay,
And so we were very strategic in thinking, what are one-time things that we can use with this funding? It's why the bigger
See.
percentage falls under operations and facilities.
okay. But thinking that we're most likely going to get an increase in the overall budget with the new Chapter 70 money, we're definitely going to be making more substantial investments in this area.
Absolutely. So we will be coming back during the budget process, again, to be strategic around our budget priorities, but that we expect would be sustainable, FTEs and other investments.
Okay, thank you.
So lastly, I'd like to bring your attention to the memo you have in regards to the Title I funds that we received. So these are funds we received that are based off of the entire city's enrollment. So you will see as part of the money distributed that DESE does allot $565,000 that we do have to administer for the private schools within the city. So we do work collaboratively with the schools throughout the school year to process their payments and making sure that they're spending the monies in alignment with what the grant funds are for. Additionally, we do spend about 60% of the money towards instructional and professional staff. We do spend an additional 16% on master teachers and acceleration academy stipends. And we do spend 3.7%, so roughly 4%, on contracted services for restorative justice and enrichment throughout the district. If there's anything else you'd like me to elaborate on, I could gladly do that.
So please forgive my ignorance, but remind me, what is Title I specifically supposed to fund?
Sure, so Title I is supposed to fund pretty much augmenting programs that we have within the district and helping us pretty much provide better enrichment services, a better PD for our teachers. I don't know if I'm missing any major categories from that, Cynthia. other
Yeah,
than
I
those
think
two.
that's right. So an example of that, Jess, is, as you know, we do acceleration academies during the vacations, and some of that funding is from Title I.
Okay.
And the instructional and professional staff is all geared around math and science and SEL for the most part.
Thank you, Maciel.
Sure.
Next, we're going to have the Oliver School building update. I'm going to invite our designer team, SMMA, and our owner project manager team, Pink, to join us with Anne Marie, our COO. You have a complete presentation packet in your materials, and today they're going to brief us with the presentation before you.
Good evening, everybody. Is that on? Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present tonight. We're really excited to show you the work that we've done on this project. And I know that Joan sent you out a very large PowerPoint earlier before this meeting, and we are not going to be going through all of those slides, but there's lots of information that will help you answer some of your questions, and some information that we really just want to put forward to you so that you have the full picture, so that we are transparent. Specifically, you'll see in the packet that we gave you, there are some slides regarding funding. It's very early in the project to discuss funding, but it's important that you have those funding numbers. But once you put something out in the public, everybody remembers that number, and we don't want to be held to a number. I can see Naomi, who works on those projects at the college, smiling, because I think you've probably experienced that too. So with that said, I would like to introduce everybody. We have our lead architect, Alex Pitkin from SMMA, along with Kristen Olson, also an architect from SMMA. And we have our project manager team. Deb Marai is the lead, and Danny Garber Letitia is also with us. And I'm going to turn this over to Alex. I am going to ask that you allow us to run through the presentation and hold your questions so that we can move this along. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie, and thank you to the board for allowing us to come and speak before you tonight. Every educational project through the state really begins with a visioning and a listening process. Maybe some of you have heard about it, and maybe were even able to attend. These were held earlier in the fall. It gave us a really great chance to listen to your educators, your administrators, to connect even to students, as you can see from the photographs. And this was led by our educational planning team. This has led to the most critical part of the submission that we've just made to the School Building Authority, which is the educational vision and the educational program plan. We're just in the process right now of finalizing some comments that came from the MSBA, very normal course of business, and you can see some of the critical bullet points that came out of that process. This is authored by the superintendent, her team, the leaders of the two schools. It's not a document that's created by us as an architectural design team. We then take this document, and what you see in front of you is sort of an abstraction of the architectural spaces that are then intended to meet the needs of the educators, the administration, and the users within the facility. So every one of those squares on that PowerPoint slide really indicates sort of the size, not necessarily the final shape, and some of the adjacency elements that we're trying to create as we move forward. And of course, it really speaks very much to the two school programs that would be coming together as one community we are intending to service 1,000 students with this particular project as it's been promoted to the state. This then leads to a series of options we call the long list that we submit to the MSBA. This is kind of this first filter, that cost estimating page that you have in your more full report. Those are order of magnitude costs. They're sort of a first look with our cost estimating team. And you can see there's a very wide range in the number of students, which starts to really kind of dictate the cost parameters around that. But I'm going to take the first four as our first step. Those are options that are on the Oliver site. And just like any other process that we run through with the state, we also look at other options and opportunities for a project within your community. And so we'll share those with you this evening as well. Also coming out of the educational plan, these were the project goals and criteria that were approved by the building committee. And you can see some of them are highlighted there. That this recognition that in the Northern District that is important to impact the highest number of students possible. That's where we arrived at that 1,000 students, which is concurrent with the elementary school program and the middle school program coming together. We want to really hit that number. We think that that's the most fiscally responsible and also the most impactful educationally. Prioritizing the educational complex for that K-8 also reduces the number of transitions. We recognize and know educationally that that is the best social, emotional way to address a child in your community's needs. And then that last bullet on the bottom, also understanding that of a dense urban environment, that we want to make sure that we're a good neighbor, that we're an educationally appropriate plan that we're coming forth with to your community. You'll see a few images, and that'll get explained a little bit better further along. This is a shot that we found from the historic commissions. We've met with them once also. It is a beloved facility right in the center of town on Campagnone Commons. This is the south face, 3 stories on this side, 4 stories on the northern side. This is the part of the building that's considered the most important. Here is sort of a locus plan. You can see the Oliver School here, the sort of double H or I shape, where the Oliver Partnership School is located. The Up Academy Oliver is located in this facility today, and sort of part of that broader campus. We've highlighted the St. Mary's School. What we discovered really immediately was that any work that happens at the Oliver site will require the students to be removed from the site. maybe 2-year project for construction, something like that. And so in the past, the city has used the St. Mary's School as what's called swing space. And so right now, we've just identified that as an early place that might have to come into play if the Oliver site is so selected. Here's a simple 3-dimensional model of the existing Oliver school building. You can see the 3 stories in front, and then it steps up to 4 at the back. And this is what I was getting at with that last bullet. What we've discovered is that we knew that the building's old, has not had really much work or any work done on it over the past many years. And so not just in terms of fitting the program in, but also improving its physical manifestation, we, in this instance, have shown that we're saving that southern side of the building. And if we were to try to fulfill that 1,000 student program, you can see that we really start to push that back up. This is 7, 8 stories, which is probably not the kind of educational environment or the urban response that we're looking for. But this was really a quick look at sort of a massing diagram that we were kind of giving us some initial concerns about the site. So those long list of options, this is option 1. It's called a base repair. The MSBA requires this. It sort of sets a baseline. It would be bringing the school up to code for accessibility, for making the site life safety compliant, improving all of the systems within the building. This tends to, you can see that red bullet at the bottom there, when you increase toilets, you put in appropriate facilities for making accessible educational spaces, you actually lose educational space when you don't increase the footprint of the building. So that makes the base repair a very challenging option, but the MSBA does require us to look at this for you. And skipping up to option 3, we did look at saving, again, the south front of the building. And these are new slides for you tonight. You can see that we've started to calculate out if the massing of the building stays below, say, 4 stories, and we start to look at the number of sections or the number of classrooms per grade, and we maintain just the Oliver Elementary School program, you can see that we start to diminish the number of students on this particular building site. So we don't know what that exact number yet. That would be further down in the design analysis, but we're just sort of putting that message out to you as we get started. The next one is option 4, and this is where we want to try to push to that K-8 scenario, which is so important to the educational plan and program. And you can see now if you reduce the number of classrooms per grade, we can still get the number of students up, but you can see that we're still falling far short of 1,000 students on this campus at the Oliver site. I'll just point out that if you were to, this is overlaid over the existing footprint, we're taking advantage of some of the city parcels that are adjacent to the current existing Oliver building. And so we're trying to spread the campus, make it much more conducive to the educational needs of the school. Very little site for immediacy of play spaces or outdoor learning environments. So we would be taking advantage of the O'Neill fields across the street or the Campagnoni Commons, which happens today as well. So these are some of the site considerations. The ones that have jumped out to us that we've been talking with the building committee about is that need for swing space if we build on any of the Oliver site options, and just simply that the full program as described does not fit on this site. And that's an important critical element. So with that early recognition, we were also asked to start to think about some alternative sites in the city. And this happens in any MSBA process where you start to look for hopefully easier options to solve your problems and your needs for your school. And so this is option 5. The Oliver School is in that red circle here. The Stone Mill site is a very short, less than about a half-mile radius away. So I think we've sent to you also some statistics on how many students live within this catchment area. So this is very much a part of the Northern District. And then just zooming in a little bit closer, I'm sure you're all very familiar with the site as you drive by it, coming in on Canal Street off of 495. the hospital, Leonard School, here's the Everett Mill, and in orange is the Stone Mill, the building that's barely occupied today. It has a few businesses inside of it. This red line denotes the actual sort of property lines that might be discussed. Everything to the east of this parking lot, is eventually is being transferred over to the city, and so that's something that would become city-owned parcel. This little orange square is an area that we've identified, and I'll switch to a couple of the slides that'll be a little bit clearer to see. In order to evaluate this building and to come forth with you to say that, yes, we think that this may be a viable alternative for your program, we had to actually do some unique analysis. So there were some specialty consultants that were brought on board. This is a nationally recognized site and building. It's got unique structural features to it and some code specifics as well. So these are things that we've evaluated, and at this point in time, we've also tested the program, and we believe it certainly can fit the 1,000-student program. So here's a three-dimensional visualization. The Stone Mill is sitting here in front of the Everett Mill. We're trying to show that it would take some redevelopment of the site so that we get those good, safe drop-off pickups. We'd have parking now available adjacent to the building. The one thing that does not fit is the physical education or the community use spaces, right? That makes sense. And so that is what this addition is. Maybe it's a little bit hard to see here, but that would represent the gymnasium and a cafeteria and some of those programs that could very easily be separated and used after hours by the community, an important part of making this a viable community use site. And then the Up Leonard School is very nearby as well. So some of the site considerations, it certainly is an iconic part of the city. We recognize that the acquisition of the facility is something that's a bit of an unknown and might have potential schedule impacts, but this is something that this early with our process with the MSBA, we can alert them to the fact that we are studying this as one of the options, and then we'll report back to you about what its validity will be. And then in that study, I mentioned to you about the parking lot and that is actually will be city land. So we thought it would make sense to look at what an all-new structure might look like in that parking lot. So here's the Stone Mill that we just studied here, and these roads are existing roads, and so we said, well, let's see if we can't fit the 1,000-student program in that area. And so it creates a new version of what we had studied in the Stone Mill parcel, and accomplishing, for all practical purposes, the same thing. And then just a site plan that indicates what that might look like and how much of that parking might be impacted, and the conversations that that would engender with the city. So the gateway parking site considerations in this case, we're still very much investigating site environmental concerns. As you're probably all well aware, the buildings that were demolished there and the change of that use, and obviously the ability to build a building without swing space is what always makes a new structure attractive. And again, the unknown site transfer timeline. This is just a quick schedule for you. I think the thing that we want to really tell you is we're closing out our preliminary submissions to the MSBA. That means we'll be rapidly moving into the next phase, which is taking those 7 options, which we think that 4 of them are worth at least considering, and then that becomes a discussion about what of those would be preferred, which ones that the school committee supports, which ones that the building committee supports, which ones the mayor's office supports. And we would be back with you sometime mid-February with that recommendation to this board and seeking your approval. So just a quick recap, those are the 7 options that were really available to us to study, sort of a little bit of a back and forth process after we had gone through our educational planning, and we would entertain any questions that you might have.
Questions? Jess?
I have questions. So, one question I have is, on the Oliver site, I see that the new building, the new building that you are proposing in one of the options is taking advantage of a section of vacant lot that's next door to the building, but there's a lot more vacant lot next door to that building, plus there's the abandoned building right next door to the alleyway there. What's the status of that, or was that looked at as an option? Is it not available for sale? It seems like it might be cheaper than the stone mill to buy, or I don't know. I mean, what's up with that?
So that property does not belong to the city. We were
Right.
looking at property lines that were within the city. As you could see from the stone mill, there's property lines that are in there that are going to be transferred to the city. We have not been in contact with the owners of that property to see if that's a viable option. At this time, it's something that if you would like to explore, we would have to talk to the mayor about that. That would be up to the city's discretion. That's not something that we did.
I
as
think
part
it's
of
worth looking into. I mean, the stone mill doesn't belong to the city either.
No, that's true, but we're talking about the land that's adjacent to it does belong to the city. The ability to have swing space in this area is one of the things we were trying to avoid.
I see. Okay, it was the swing, all right.
It's the swing space issue. Just so the board is aware, swing space, which means moving the students to another space, is not covered under reimbursable. It's not considered an eligible cost. It's quite costly to move students for 2 years to another site, and we would have to bore the brunt of that fully as a city. It's not eligible at all.
Okay. I have some thoughts about that, but I can mull them over. Second question is, what happens to the Oliver School? Like, let's say that the decision tends towards the stone. And, well, first of all, let me say comment, not question. I do think it's a really interesting and potentially very valuable idea to locate a school down in that gateway section, because there's been so much housing development on the island of the city, on the North Island, and a significant portion of that is affordable housing, which means that it's more likely to be yielding children to the school system. So I do think that those ideas have a ton of merit, but I'm curious, here comes the question, about what would happen to the Oliver School in the event that the decision went in that direction, because I feel like already the decision to pull the high school out of that area of the city, and I know we've found other uses for the building, but that's an area of the city that it's very important to keep vibrant and lively. And I do also like the access to physical recreation space that the city parks provide. So what's going to happen to the Oliver? Or what would possibly?
I'm going to take a stab at that. The superintendent can jump in if I miss something. But basically, the Oliver, if this were to move to the stone mill or the parking lot, the Oliver could then be used as swing space when we build the Leahy, because you know that we have that project coming too.
Right.
I don't think, in my time here in building schools, we've always said, oh, we're going to close that school down. We have never found the need to close a school down, because we have always found other uses for that building. I could see that being used for the Adult Learning Center. I could see that.
I was going to suggest that.
But we're not at the point right now where we're talking that far in advance of what's going to happen to that. What I could tell you is that it has outlived its educational usefulness for this purpose. However, I think that we could repurpose the school while the other programs are being built, and then do some work on the school to make it a more viable option for other programs within the city. But that would be up to you all, along with the city leaders, to be responsible for that, because your charter actually has it that the city owns those properties and buildings, so they would have a say in that as well. but I don't think we've really gone down there, but I have lots of things that, facilities-wise, that run through my head on how we could use that building. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Other questions?
I do have a question. Oops. So, looking back at the stone mill idea, so you have to go back. The one that has the parking? Okay, there. So, no, the one before. So, I see that adjacent to the stone building, you're proposing maybe building another structure that will hold the cafeteria and so forth. And, the area that I was thinking about is the green space for the kids to have their energy being released during break. Because I don't see it there. Like, is that something that is being proposed to? Or is that like the round green space that is?
Yes, exactly that. You can see there's a sort of a swath here. Of course, no decisions have been made. This is just sort of an artistic kind of an endeavor. But the thought was that it would be a different opportunity than the Oliver School, which has literally no site, to potentially develop some site for those exact purposes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I just would like to say that the building committee themselves is very committed to outdoor space and the educators. So those are discussions that will be coming down the road as well. And as we come, we're going to be looking for your ideas for those things too.
John? I'm looking at the long list and taking into account how densely populated that area is. You need a facility that's going to hold 1,000 kids. I can't even imagine us going through all this and just ending up with 500 kids in a building. To me, it doesn't make sense.
What I would say to you is that the building committee agrees with that, and we worked very, very hard with the MSBA to get the enrollment up to 1,000. I know that Denise is here, as other people have, but Denise and the superintendent, it's very difficult to get an additional enrollment at the MSBA, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the process, and to be able to get them to allow us to give an enrollment certificate for 1,000 students is not an opportunity that we want to slip through our fingers.
Julia?
Thank you so much for this, the feasibility study. I think you guys did a great job with this. My question is, in looking at the different sites, how many students are housed in this building?
Currently, we have 525 students at the Oliver Partnership School. That varies on any given day, but that's pretty much accurate.
At the Lawrence High School,
At the Oliver, at this school? At this school, we have 4 different schools that are housed here. We have the international school, which is about 200 students. I know Denise is here, so I'm going to do these off the top of my head. You want to jump in if I'm wrong? International is about 200. I would say that High School Learning Center is about 125. Up Oliver, which is the school that will be moving over, is about 350. And then we have SES, which I'm going to say is 225. I don't know, how close am I? I think that those are pretty close numbers.
So we have
93, I'm counting.
So here we have close to 1,000,
That is
give or
correct.
take. Was this building ever considered to house the Oliver students? Where we have the capacity here, and it's so close to the location that we're looking at right now?
We would have to move those 1,000 students to, those programs to other facilities if we did do that. And at one time, the Oliver school was here. The Oliver Partnership School was moved over to the site that it is now. It was the Adult Learning Center. They piggybacked and forth. So that school has moved several times. I think that Oliver Partnership moved there 5 years ago. Is it 5 years ago? Maybe 6. They were located in this, this building was basically built for high school students and is not really appropriate for younger children, which is housed over at the Oliver Partnership School.
But neither is the stone mill building, because now you have to rehabilitate that whole building to make it age appropriate for what you're looking to do, correct?
That is correct.
I have my concerns as well with that particular site because of the location and what it would do to the gateway, which was purposely designed to bring people into the city, into the commercial industrial area of the city, by placing a school in that area. Not only that, because of the also the age of the children that would be going there. In your plans here, I see there are issues with, we're saying that there are no issues with parking. However, we know, I think some of us know, that there are restrictions on the use of the land in that particular site due to the previous occupant of that area, correct?
Yes, and that is in some of the considerations. You see that very clearly.
And we're
in the
planning to bring our kids into an area that already has restrictions because of health hazards. So I'm just pointing these things out so
Nope.
that we're all on the same page. The other thing that I noticed here was we're taking into consideration if we renovate any part of the old Oliver School is the O'Neill Park in back of the school, correct? That was in one of your,
That is correct.
and do we have additional green space to take over that green space that we have behind the school right now?
So we are not using the park, as you just described. If we were to take that piece of the land, we would have to then replicate that in that same side of the city, so in that North Common, and there's nowhere in the city to replicate that green space. We would be using that green space as more of an outdoor play. We had considered potentially blocking off that part of the street and using that for a bus loop, but we would not be taking the green space because we would not be allowed to.
And Maureen, we would once again be taking away areas from the north part of the city because that part of the city is not really important. And this is my own personal statement based on here. There was a big fight in order to construct the new high school in the south part of the city,
remember.
if you remember that.
I do.
And one of it was to protect the integrity of the area of the neighborhoods, the way that people have it. I'm in total agreement of anything new coming for our children to the city, but I'm also very cautious about the damage or the consequences that might affect or alter the neighborhoods of the people in this particular area. You're saying that the Oliver School, or that the Leahy School, you would then need to utilize additional space which you'd move to the Oliver School if this was the plan with the Stone Mill building. What about the St. Mary's School building, which is closer to the Leahy School?
So I just want to be clear. First of all, no decisions have been made, which is why we're here. So I just want to
understand.
make sure that people hear that,
No, I
that are watching,
understand.
because this is a really important conversation for all of us to be having. What I am saying to you is that the Oliver site, we would be able to move, if the Leahy was coming up, we would be able to take the Leahy students, move them to the Oliver. Now, this is if that area were the area that we actually select as our final project. Right now, we're in the feasibility stage, so we're just exploring all of the options that are available to us. And unfortunately, in a city this dense, there's not a lot of options. And we certainly have, to your point, looking at the north side because we believe that they are in the greatest need, and that's why both of those projects were selected. But at the end of the day, if that were to happen at Stone Mill or in that Gateway project, we'll just call it the Gateway area, the Leahy School would then move into the Oliver School while we built on the Leahy site. So that's why I was suggesting that. noted to you that St. Mary's was open as an option in the event that the Oliver site is selected and we expand that site, which I just talked to you about potentially using that part of the street. In that event, we will need to access St. Mary's, both for the Leahy and the Oliver project, if we're able to use that. But we have identified that as an area to the MSBA to say, yes, this is possible, because if this happens, we believe that we can acquire the use of this building temporarily. So that project, the St. Mary's could be used for basically both projects if we needed swing space, hopefully.
No, I think you're kind of doing your due diligence in trying to find the appropriate site. I personally don't feel that the Stone Mill building would be a good site for our students based on the density of the area and the types of uses that should be going into that area. It's a beautiful building, but if you're going to bring students to an area that is already congested, you go into that parking lot and you hardly can find a parking space in there to go into any of the buildings that are there currently. Besides the fact that there are certain types of businesses there, including welfare or DCF or some of those buildings, that should be totally separated from our children's educational sites. I think I would encourage you to look at other buildings in the city. I'm sure that I know the city is densely populated, but you still have sites maybe on Broadway, some of the old mills on Broadway, some of the mills are still around the riverbanks that might be better fit for our children than the Stone Mill building. Besides the cost of renovating that particular building, that is just my concern, and I just wanted to point out some of the reason behind it.
I very much appreciate that, and that is why we're here. We do want to hear everybody's opinion. This is a huge community project. This is not just a school project, so I really appreciate your comments.
Thank you.
Can I just have a follow-up based on a point that, oh, thank you, you adjusted me, thank you. Based on the point that Julia brought up, I do remember also that there are parking restrictions on the Gateway. Well, first of all, I know that the Gateway site has been remediated to a certain degree, but new construction on that site is there's bound to be some issues around that, so it would be good for us to hear more about what the challenges could be and what the plan is around remediating them. And then, speaking as someone who works for an organization that has built on brownfields before, it's certainly absolutely possible to make it completely safe for habitation and for something like a school, but we would need to understand what the plan is around that. But I would like to also understand what the city's parking obligations are around there, because I know they have I'm pretty sure they have agreements with the hospital, with other abutters. There's that area is not so free and clear, so it'd be good for us to understand how that impacts the time frame of this. And then which is first so this would be first in the pipeline and then the Leahy would get done if we did it this way?
That is correct.
Okay.
Other questions?
I just have a question. First of all, coming from someone who works at the department, there are a lot of acronyms in here that I don't know what they mean, so I need a key at some point. PDPs, PSRs,
Can I just say, in the presentation that we gave to you on Friday, the first page gives you all those acronyms. So just look at page 1.
Thank you.
We didn't want to put it up there tonight because we were trying to be brief.
Got it. Thank you.
My
I'm following along
apologies.
this one. No, all good. I guess my question is more around understanding sort of the process with the MSBA from this point forward. Sort of what are the different steps? What are their considerations? And then I think to this point of, I know there was community involvement in the visioning, but clearly there are a lot of questions, especially from community members on this board. And so what's the process to get real feedback, input from community members, moving forward in terms of different sites and considerations? I'm just curious what that looks like.
I'll take a stab at that as well. We did a tremendous amount of outreach, similar to the process when we hired the new superintendent. We kind of took the model that you all did and put that into play. And we do have a place on the website where all the visioning sessions. There was also visioning sessions that happened with the educators themselves in the springtime of last year. All of our meetings are open meetings. We actually moved our meeting here last week, hoping that we would get some more community members. So the process itself we've tried very, very hard to get a lot of community input into that. We had the meetings in the morning and in the same sessions in the afternoons. We were able to have students involved. I guess if we could really use your help in trying to get out the word. But at this point, what we'll present to you in February is we'll be looking for a vote for one section. Just to kind of step back to give you a bigger view of the whole process, and I'm going to take a stab at this, and my project manager is going to tell me if I'm off. This project started in 2016 when we submitted the statement of interest to the MSBA. That probably takes about 9 months to get us approved and into the pipeline. Typically, you have about 100 to 150 applicants in any given year, and depending on their funding is how they select those applicants. And it is usually a very short list. So we're very fortunate to have two projects in the pipeline. With that said, then you go into the eligibility phase where you have to go and make sure that the community is open to this. So we've been to many city council meetings, we've gained approval from city council, we've bonded money for this part of the study, which is now we're in the feasibility. Once we get through this phase of the project, and similar to some of the questions that both Jess and Julia have regarding the feasibility of that we then will be spending more money to determine which is best, if we can spend money on the green space. But right now, that's not what we're going to be expending funds on until we come up with that final option. And that's when the real legwork. So this part right now that we're in is not only selecting a site, but really understanding what the educational vision of this community is. And that's what the driving force of the PDP, which is the Preferred Design Proposal.
Preliminary Design Program.
Thank you. See, I get them wrong too. But basically, the educational process is really what we're focusing on right now, because that's what drives the new building. And that's what drives the space and all of those other components into it. I can tell you what the goals are is looking at special education is a huge focus of this committee, the EL population, and basically the open space and the opportunities that our students don't have now. So to that end, we have also looked at adding potentially a smaller site, not 500, but 736, 750, which combines the two enrollments that we have now at that site, if that's possible, so that we added to our options.
As far as the MSBA process goes in general, though, we did submit the preliminary design program on November 7th. They had 3 weeks to develop their comments, which we received just before Thanksgiving. We're in the process of responding to those comments, and then we'll issue a final PDP with those comments absorbed. That includes a revised educational plan, and I think we'll be very excited to circulate that educational plan to you that does give you a lot of that backbone to what the building is that we're putting together here. Then moving forward, the end of the feasibility is the preferred schematic report. The PDP is educational visioning and existing conditions documentation, so you have your net cast very broad, which is why we have those 7 options. We've narrowed it down, and now we're going to take a deeper dive and look more into the environmental concerns that we ourselves uncovered during that process. Also, we have a lot of legwork to do on acquisition and the transfer of sites. So all of that is now underway, so that when it comes to the conclusion of the preferred schematic report and we come back with a recommendation from the building committee to you, we have answers to all of these questions.
And sorry, just one more question. So the preferred schematic report, that'll be the building committee coming to us with a final recommendation of a site. And you'll have all the information with the analysis you've done with the other sites, why they were ruled out and things like that.
Site, program, educational plan, cost.
Great, okay, thank you.
Again, just want to say estimated costs.
Another question about the community process, because I do know, I mean, I know you guys did try to get word out about that and sent it to a bunch of us and we spread it and so on, but I think one thing that could be helpful if you're open to trying to schedule a couple of more sessions around this is sharing these things with the community, because I think it's one thing for someone to have an invitation to an abstract community input process, and it's another thing for them to have schematic drawings to respond to and options. And I think if you put some of those out there, you'll get more, people are gonna have some opinions and some input.
And I think that's a great segue for me to remind people that if they are interested, this is actually on our website on the link, and we have put it up and taken it down in various parts, so we'll put it up tomorrow as a highlight so that people can click on and they can see those things that you're talking about.
Another consideration, Anne Marie, I noticed that we are being updated on this, but the city council hasn't been, correct?
So we did go to we have updated the city council as different parts of this process have progressed. We went to the city council on Tuesday to present. We were planning on presenting to them, and the tax classification hearing took much longer than they anticipated, and the night became very late, and we were then moved off the so we will be back. We are actually going to be continuing to work with the city council to provide that information to them.
Thank you, but I think it's speaking on what Jess just said, that's a good avenue of getting more people aware of this, especially if you request a special meeting just for this presentation, so that the councilors have an opportunity to get their constituents to make their constituents aware, sorry about this, of the meeting, and have them perhaps come in to participate. But it would probably, I would encourage you to request a special meeting of the city council just for this purpose, instead of putting it on the agenda as a regular item.
I'll bring that back to the committee. That's great advice.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate this information and all this good work to date, and we look forward to seeing it all move forward.
Don, can I just say one more thing?
Absolutely.
Just for the record, I agree with Pat that I do want to say that I don't think we should spend a ton of money and all this effort to not get that much bang for the buck out of it. So I do think we need to have a 1,000 student option on this. That's all.
And in closing, I would just like to thank the entire building committee who works tirelessly on this project, as well as the educators of both the Oliver Partnership and the Up Oliver and the central office department heads who have worked tirelessly on this education proposal. I think you're going to be really thrilled with the work that they've done.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. SMMA Pink, thank you so much.
Thank you. Just before I hand it back to the Superintendent for Nutrition Services update, I want to just note that we are joined by our friends in the Lawrence Teachers Union. I know Kathy Delaney, Cheryl Travers from the Executive Committee have been here tonight, and Lisa Lannon from the Hennessy Building Rep as well. We appreciate them being here tonight. We thank you for all your hard work. Superintendent.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll invite Carol and Rosemary, and I'll ask Anne-Marie to remain with us for Nutrition Services update. Yeah, this is Shark Tank moment. Love it. I love it.
Are you kidding? Wow.
So go ahead, Carol, when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Carol Noonan. I am the Director of Food Services for the school system. I wanted to start out by talking about the CEP. As we've done this for the past 6 years, we began in 2014. It provides all of our students with free breakfast, free lunch, and free after-school snack if they are assigned to that. It's a program that is, it ensures that at least, in order to be eligible, it ensures that at least 40% of our students are low income, and they are identified students, which means they're identified through the virtual gateway. In order to be eligible, we also have to participate in both the school lunch and school breakfast program. And we have to promise that we serve lunches and breakfasts to all students, no matter what. The benefits to that for students and parents are there are no more lunch applications. And that is one of the biggest benefits to the program. And of course, there's no meal charges. That's a benefit to us. So the program is funded by the USDA. They establish the regulations and the guidelines.
That's all right. Go ahead. They have the materials in front of them.
And the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Office of Food and Nutrition, monitor our program and approve our reimbursements. So the programs we run are a universal free breakfast program. At the moment, we have 20 schools participating in breakfast after the bell. We have some schools that have been state-mandated schools that we are working on getting after the bell programs in, and that's Lawrence High School, the Weatherby, and South Lawrence East. Weatherby has already made a decision to do breakfast in the classroom, and we're working on the other two schools. We have the Universal Free Lunch Program, the After-School Snack Program, and dinner at Lawrence High School. And these are the guidelines that we have to do our meal patterns and our menus by. And then we have the mobile market. Once a month, we partner with Greater Boston Food Bank on a Saturday. We service at the moment about 450 Lawrence Public Schools families. They come in, they shop, they get about 50 to 60 pounds of food, dry goods, frozen, and a lot of produce. And we had a great summer meals program this past summer. We had an increase of 8% across the board participation. I don't know where they came from, but that was wonderful. And we had 31 sites participate. And let's see. So these are our partners. UMass Extension provides some of our nutrition education to both the staff and students. The EOS Foundation provides breakfast after the bell initiatives. They're a great support system. Project Bread we have in the schools. We have the Chef in the School program. They work with our staff. They work with the kids, trying to get them to try different foods. Of course, Greater Boston Food Bank. UMass Terry provided a lot of online modules for training for our staff. These are just some pictures of breakfast in the classroom. We are in process of working with the breakfast menu to incorporate more meat alternatives, which are proteins, for breakfast and less carbs. These are some of the lunches that are offered in all of our schools. So this is what they are offered. That's a full plate that they are offered. They are required to take 3 of these items, if that's what they choose, and at least one of them must be a fruit or a vegetable. And I'm open for questions.
Questions or comments?
I'm glad about more protein at breakfast. I think that's very important. I'm wondering, like, how are we, not to place a burden on anyone around this, but like, how do we monitor what gets eaten and what kind of choices kids are making? Because I know to a certain extent, like, we can put things in front of kids, but we can't make them eat, right?
Right.
And so, you know, what is happening in terms of that? Like, I mean, you know, my son comes home and gives me a daily report of what the breakfast was and what the lunch was and what he ate and what he didn't eat. And we have conversations about vegetables and protein all the time, but I'm just wondering how that plays out and how you guys kind of gather information or feedback about how things are going in that way.
Well, the best feedback we can get is from the students themselves. You know, and our staff in the lines are always encouraging them to try new things. You know, you can't force them to take it, but we try to encourage them to at least try it at least once or twice.
Yeah. Do the teachers kind of give you feedback on what's been popular, or what's been used or not used, or?
I would say yes, yes. As for the breakfast in the classroom, if a student is not eating the fruit, they can take a share table and save those items for later in the snack.
Yep.
At the end of the day, the students are free to take it home.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Right. Okay. Well, I definitely would just encourage us to keep trying to get the healthy options in and partnering with organizations like Groundwork or others that I know you guys partner with that help the students like participate in the gardening end of it, so they're participating in the production and the cooking classes to help get folks more accustomed to that. I think is really important.
That's where UMass Extension does a lot of that work also.
Yeah.
And we do have a girl from Groundwork who is doing taste tests at one of our schools. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Good.
Then it's all fresh produce that she wants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Julia?
I just have a quick comment. Have we noticed an increase in our children's ability to absorb classroom work, get more involved based on these changes that have taken place?
Yes, the EOS Foundation, when we first started partnering with them, they would monitor nursing visits, discipline records, and they noticed a drastic reduction in those, also with tardiness.
Very good. And how do we determine, how was it determined the schools that would participate in this? Because this is supposed to be for the whole school district, correct, or no?
It started out with just a few, and it's mandated that just about all of them are required.
Are there any that are not on the program?
Right now, SES has not, and I'm going to double check the list because I'm not sure if they're on it or not.
And is there any particular reason why those are not, or?
I think those students needed the social and emotional, the ability to socialize with other people, and I think that's why they're hesitant to do it, instead of, just keeping them in the classroom to eat. They wanted them out and about. I believe, I'm not 100% sure.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Pat?
John, just one quick comment, Carol. I absolutely love your brochure.
Thank you.
I think it's beautiful. It really is. It's to the point. And the best part of all is no meal applications to
I
fill
know.
out. That is absolute best.
Or to process on our end.
No, this was very well done.
Thank you. And that is given to families. It's at the Family Resource Center. So when parents register, they get that.
That's great.
Any other questions or comments? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary, Carol,
Thank you.
and Anne Marie.
Okay. Moving to the report of the chair. On the student representative, I have spoken / corresponded with Jess, who's one of the 3 folks on that committee, and that committee includes Julia and the mayor. They are going to confer this month and bring the recommendation for January. Jess, you have the recommendations and can circulate them to the committee, or they have been, or whatever the case is. Yeah.
I got a hard copy of them, and I believe that I PDF'd it to my committee members, but I know people have been traveling and things
Yeah.
might have gotten lost in translation, so I will redo that.
Great, thanks.
Yes, please. Actually, John, the last I got was the email between you guys asking, and then there was no attachment to my email. So just so that we know.
Sorry. Whoops.
I just want to say that I enjoyed the fact that you pointed out that Jess did not get the attachment on her email. That could just as easily have been me.
It's all right. Please don't write nya, nya, nya in the minutes.
All right, moving to turnaround plan. There was a meeting of the turnaround plan subcommittee, and I will turn that over to Jess if you can give us an update.
Absolutely. So Pat and Noemi and I met about what we really did was meet to talk about the public process for input into the turnaround plan. And we met to prepare in advance of meeting with the consultants, which I think all of us have given feedback on and have been chosen at this point for that. So what we discussed is that Pat made the excellent point that we kind of went through a process of designing a process for the superintendent selection, and we want to build off of that and not reinvent it. So we are suggesting that we hold a similar series of focus groups focusing on parents, teachers, students, community groups and partners, public officials, faith-based organizations, and neighborhood groups. And that, as we did with the superintendent selection process, we set up a number of opportunities for those groups to meet with some different time and day options so that we can accommodate different working schedules. And we'll have some provision for both translation and childcare at those meetings so that people can fully participate. We're going to focus on providing the most options for parents and students and then teachers in there, and then like substantial options, but probably not quite as many for the other groups we identified. We also said that, and we'll discuss all of this with the consultants when we meet with them, but we want to make sure that we're reaching out through a variety of different media to publicize these opportunities, including newspapers, Spanish language radio, social media, including the We Are Lawrence site, and that we'd like to have some flyers that we can distribute in taxi cabs, barber shops, salons, bodegas. Pat even suggested that we put a bus ad on one of the MVRTA buses, so I don't know if our budget supports that, but I think that could be good. And we'll commit to, as a committee, we'll create like a list of outreach targets for people to make sure that these different groups and people get notification about it, and contacts at some of these other places. And then we want to work with the consultant to create a list of questions, or give input into the list of questions that we're going to we want a consistent set of questions that are being asked at these sessions so that we can have some coherent data to look at coming out of them. And we wanted to make sure there was a mix of both open-ended questions and specific kind of ranked questions so that we can get more parsable data, basically. So, did I miss anything, guys?
That was good, yeah. That was everything.
I think you're all set.
All right.
Thank you.
That's our plan. And so we're just now waiting for some date possibilities to meet with the consultants around
Great. And so I think we can say that Great Schools has been retained as the consultants to the turnaround plan, and so we know that will be the next step there. And you also had one conversation with DESI representative around just there and the turnaround? Yep.
Yes, I did. I had it more around sort of the compliance issues
Right.
and so on, so that was helpful. I
Gotcha.
think we're all like on the same page, and what we've described is well within the process, so.
Great.
Yeah.
So that will, that dovetails nicely to earned autonomy update. So tonight I can announce that the Earned Autonomy Steering Committee has been formed. Just to give just a very broad sense on this, that's a committee for stakeholders to have sort of make sure that the broad input is received through that committee, and that none of the key stakeholders are in like any way left out of the loop. And so it just from the broadest standpoint there, that includes our teachers, institutional partners, our families, principals, LPS, and LAE. And so the superintendent and I will serve on the Earned Autonomy Steering Committee. Kinnan Foley from LPS, Kevin Quaselbosch from Spark as a principal member, Kim Berry from the Lawrence Teachers Union will serve on the steering committee, Lane Glenn from Northern Essex from the institutional standpoint, and last but absolutely not least, Charita Rizzo will serve as a family member. So that will be the Earned Autonomy Steering Committee, not to be confused with the LAE Earned Autonomy Subcommittee. I don't love to have a million different committees, but just to understand, so the steering committee has the stakeholders. We have to have an LAE subcommittee because whatever gets developed has to come through that subcommittee to come to LAE for a vote, the same way the turnaround subcommittee will have to bring a turnaround plan through. I also initiated just a sort of piece of coordination this week, which is to make sure that we have a weekly phone call where we have the consultants from Turnaround, the consultants from Earned Autonomy, LPS, LAE, on a weekly check-in call, and that is to just focus on the actual doing of the work, so that when the steering committee sets the priorities, when the turnaround subcommittee sets their priorities and says this is what we want to see, that weekly call is just a check-in to talk to the consultants who are there to implement and make sure that the work's being done, but also really critical as we move forward to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts or that the two processes are not in alignment. Because at the end of the day, the Earned Autonomy Framework and the turnaround plan, we won't have done the job right if there's anything there that's contrary. They're both sort of statements of values and intent and action, and the priorities within that, and so they've got to be in alignment. And so we want to avoid duplication and make sure they're in alignment. And so I've just put this check-in call in place to make sure that where everybody's talking to each other, consultants are clear on the work to be done, and that it's getting done. And so in January, we will lay out the exact timeline. Work will have begun, but we will lay out the exact envisioned timeline for both processes. I will ask consultants to brief the board on their roles more specifically. And then we will also get updates from the two subcommittees relative to their meetings with the consultants and what they're seeing. But I hope in January, at our January meeting on January 8th, we will paint a very clear picture of what we're doing, what's been done to date, and where it's going, and on what timeline. And I will just say earned autonomy is a little bit behind turnaround right now. That is mainly just around the logistics of working out a funding stream and process around consultant selection. Any questions on turnaround or earned autonomy at this time?
I do, just my one question is, it would be good to have clarity from Desi on what kind of budget we have around the turnaround plan process, because we will need money for like childcare and translation and things like that. So it'd be good to know that information. I don't know how we get that.
So I would say that the first coordinating call we have, I know you may not be on it, but like I'll make sure that we get that asked and answered.
Thank you.
Great. On superintendent's review, literally just want to note that with the presentation of the draft goals tonight, we sort of officially begin the next review process. And as we mentioned, we'll review those goals and give feedback to the superintendent before the January meeting. Just wanted to note that we are in a new superintendent review cycle now. We're going to hold the vote on the minutes just around a question that I did not get a chance to address before the meeting. And then we will take up those minutes and the minutes for tonight's meeting at the next meeting on January 8th. Any final questions, comments, concerns from any board members? Great. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. At this time, we are adjourned. Thank you.